bronchitis, and so I'm having difficulty speaking. Anyway, I'm Jim Shrewsbury. I'm the Aldermanic President here in St. Louis. And I want to thank you for having this forum and inviting me. And I want to thank all of you for coming. You know, I've been to meetings throughout the city over the last 5 years. And more people are taking an interest in political activity and neighborhood groups. And I think that's positive. You see a lot of good things happening in St. Louis. Now, I'm not going to gloss over our problems or our challenges. We have plenty of them. But I think for the most part, the city of St. Louis is moving in the right direction. I was out campaigning the other day and ran into a fellow who lived out in Chesterfield, sold his house, moved to St. Louis City, and is building a new house here in the city. Now, that would not have happened 10 years ago. And while that in and of itself is just one isolated incident, that's being repeated throughout the city. And that means there's more jobs, there's more economic activity. The city's moving in the right direction. Things are going great. And the Board of Aldermen has been part of that process. I've balanced the committees geographically and racially. We are online now. We've upgraded our staff. We are making a contribution to this city. You don't hear about us the way you do the Board of Education or the City of Overland. We are part of the process, and I will take credit for setting the demeanor and the goals of the Board of Aldermen for the last 5 years. On the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, I work closely with the mayor and the comptroller, but I never forget that I work for you. I'm independent and I'm fair. I'm not a rubber stamp. I'm not an obstructionist. I do not what I want to do, but what is right. And I believe I've made a contribution to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, and it is now contributing to the growth of the city. I was an alderman for 19 and a half years, and I was dubbed by the Archie City Chronicle Mr. Dependable. And that was, quite frankly, a title I enjoyed, because I was a good constituent alderman. I had my telephone number published in my home telephone number published in the telephone book. I returned calls every day. I had neighborhood meetings. I had town hall meetings. I did newsletters every year. I really responded to my constituents, and not all aldermen do that. But more importantly, as 16th Ward Alderman and as Aldermanic President, I've had my own legislative agenda. Okay? Now, I've supported all the big projects in that, but I've also supported legislation that I believe improves the quality of life for everyone in St. Louis. Let me give you some examples. I established a fund for women who are victims of domestic violence to pay some of their medical expenses. You know, it's very difficult for a woman if she has her glasses broken or needs some dental work to go out and get a job if she's a victim of domestic violence. We now have a fund to help these women who have suffered that terrible abuse. I worked on legislation to get drug dealers, prostitutes, and their customers out of neighborhoods. But I also supported legislation to set up a diversion fund for these individuals, because many of these people are not criminals. They're mentally ill or they have drug or alcohol problems. And we are now funding programs to move them out of the criminal system and into the social agencies where they need help. Truancy is a big problem in this city. The new superintendent, Dr. Borsaw, contacted me and asked me if I would handle legislation to curb the problem. And Chief Mokwa is now working on that, and the Public Safety Committee is reviewing it. And we're going to come up with some legislation that will, number one, cut down on the nuisance during the day of children outside when they should be in school, and hopefully increase school attendance. I'm the co-sponsor with Alderman Fred Wessels of the green legislation to establish more green buildings, and that's very, very important in St. Louis City, particularly a city where you have a lot of growth now. And what I mean by a green building is a building that is built for most part recyclable materials, and at the same time uses renewable energy sources and uses less energy than a typical type building. And we're going to try to require as many city buildings, city-run buildings built by the city, to be green buildings as possible. And there's going to be more legislation coming down the road on that, and I think that's very important. St. Louis City used to be one of the only cities in the nation where you could burn medical waste. And until I passed an ordinance prohibiting that. Several years ago, a young man was shot and killed by a police officer. He had gone to Walmart and bought one of those handheld BB guns. The police officer thought it was a real gun, drew on him and killed him. I passed an ordinance prohibiting stores like Walmart from selling those type of guns to children and to people carrying them concealed. A few years ago over on Hydraulic Avenue, a young boy was killed. He was playing with his father's gun and he shot his best friend. I passed an ordinance requiring that before you can get a gun lock in the city of St. Louis, before you can get a gun permit, you have to have a gun lock. Several years ago, when there was a hepatitis outbreak, many people were getting hepatitis. I passed an ordinance requiring that people who work in restaurants and people who work in the food industry get vaccinated for hepatitis. Now, that's not the sort of legislation that raises you a bunch of campaign contributions, okay? Because that benefits the citizens of St. Louis, okay? And I've supported the development, but I've also done my best to support people who live here and try to make this city a better place. I got elected to the Board of Aldermen in 1983 when I was 27 years old. And a mere 24 years later now, I'm the president of the board. In those early days when I was elected, they used to describe me in the paper as a reformer and a maverick. And I've gone from a freshman legislator to a seasoned lawmaker and the Aldermanic President. But my core values haven't changed. I'm still committed to those goals and ideals I had when I was 27 years old. And that is, people in politics need to be honorable, professional, above board. The government needs to be effective, open, and responsible. And that it needs to deal with long-term solutions to problems the city is facing. I would very much appreciate your endorsement. I would appreciate your active support and your vote in March. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.